Okay, moving on to our equity forecast now. The time period for the data in the book is quite interesting, I think. 1900 to 2017. And they looked at 21 countries. And in the curriculum, very interesting what they did with this here. They looked at the mean returns firstly. And the range of returns of the means was relatively narrow. It's quite interesting. So all that time period over all those countries, the lowest mean was Austria. And the highest 9.4 was South Africa. So the conclusion that they're making here, in terms of the data, that it's relatively a low range in terms of the mean returns. Yeah, over the 100 years there, not meaningly different. Quite interesting when you look at this here. So yes, over short time periods it can be quite different, but over the longer period here, relatively similar across many parts of the world. And this idea of taking a small sample of that period, we know there can be a lot more imprecise. Now, look at the number of times so far in our tour through economics that they've mentioned this idea of a shrinkage. And just a quick reminder of this, a shrinkage is using two forecasts. Two forecasts. And often one of the forecasts might be history, data from the past, and one might be some kind of a model that you're using as well, or your judgment as well. And the idea of a shrinkage technique is to choose a weighting. Guys, have a weight times the past and a weight times your own judgment coming in. And they're saying that's a lot more predictable than purely relying on the past. Okay, so the idea of using discounted cash flow, you've seen this before, and I guess the one that's most applicable here for us is our Gordon's growth model. So a quick reminder here. When we think about, guys, estimating a price or value today, often think about the next dividend, D1. Then of course we've got our discount rate, and we've also got, guys, our growth rate here as well. And here we're rearranging to get our returns, our required returns, expected returns, forecasted returns, I guess. And when we rearrange the model, we have D1 over the current price, and of course plus G. Now when you put that all together here, we know we have the yield component and we have the growth component. We're going to see this quite a bit in other parts of the chapter as well too. A lot of the models that follow kind of build a bit further on this model. You know, from level 2, this is a constant growth model, so the level of growth here has to be relatively, well, sustainable over the long period. Now, the intrinsic value of something today, we know it's the PV of the future cash flows. Whether you're looking at fixed income, whether you're looking at real estate, for example, here, whether you're looking at equity area as well. So these dividend discount models, or looking at net operating income, cash flows for real estate, or coupons there for fixed income. What's the value today? It's the present value of those cash flows. Here we have the second key model. So the Taylor rule kind of came first. This is very, very testable. It's the Grignard and Kroner model. Now, it's had a bit of a makeover from the old syllabus. It has had a makeover. So when you look back over the past morning papers, it's just a little bit of a slight difference the way they've expressed this. But the idea is the same. Now, you firstly, guys, have the three components here. And you notice that the first component here being the dividend yield, guys, the dividend yield. Now, the last component, guys, here, the change in the PE, they call the the repricing component. Often call that the repricing. And that's the short-term change in the PE ratio that you estimate, the short-term change. And I guess of all the whole model here, that's the most controversial part. It's hard to know for sure what's going to happen, of course. But remember, guys, this is the estimate. This is your estimated return here, using all forecasted returns. That's your forward-looking estimate of the change in the PE. Where the exam often has some fun with you, though, where they like to have some fun here, is the middle bit. And what this is, guys, here is the change in the earnings per share. The change in the earnings per share. Now, to understand what's going on here, let's have a look at the earnings per share idea. So you've got the earnings over the number of shares. Now, you notice that this value here is the increase in the number of shares, the increase in the number of shares. Now, if you increase the number of shares, what's going to happen to your earnings per share? If you increase the number of shares, it's going to fall, it's going to be diluted. So the sign in this depends on if the number of shares is going up. So guys, if the number of shares is going up, in the formula, you have a minus coming in here, minus the change in the number of shares. But if the number of shares, guys, is actually falling here, if the number of shares is falling, we actually have a repurchase. They're buying back the shares. So guys, this is often what's tested in the exam here. You might be told they are repurchasing shares. And you're often told that by a repurchase yield. Guys, you're given a repurchase yield in the question. So if they're buying back some shares, the number of shares is actually going to be falling and your earnings per share is going to be rising. So that's why this is quite a useful way to summarize this middle term here. It's the increase in the earnings per share. On the one hand, you've got the earnings going up, then the number of shares. This middle term could be positive or it could be negative. Just watch out though, guys. They're going to have some fun with you here. Check out the repurchase yield. That's the best clue. Now, putting it all together then here, that increase in the earnings per share could be positive or negative, but it all comes into the overall estimate of our Gruner and Kroner. Now, it is a slight extension on our Gordon's growth. Now, past questions, they love this in the exam from the past, and here's what they love to do. They ask you to separate things out into the three components. Number one, what's the income component, the cash flow component? Number two, what's the growth component, the nominal growth component? And number three, what's the repricing component as well? And if it's a morning version for the exam, define the components too. So there'll be a mark for showing the formula, a mark for showing the numbers too. Remember, guys, with the morning exam, making sure you show your work is so important. But also, of course, keeping to time is important as well. But there is time to show your work in this case. And those three components added together, here's number one, and you guys, here's number two, and here's number three. Put those three components together and you have the overall return.